Mage going to come out? How are they going to play around it? So when we jump into this Dark Heart thicket, keep your eye on that. How will they use this Fire Mage to their advantage, or will Method NA be able to use a more meta composition to take this one down?
I mean, I'm going to be surprised here to see, Claris, what kind of pulls they do with the Fire Mage, because they certainly can. I mean, actually, maybe they will pull some of the trash onto the boss, but they have to be careful with that bolster, all that Ignite spread from the Fire Mage. Pretty conventional to see here from Sunsky on the left, actually from both teams, kind of stealthing past that first trash and getting a big pull together here in a moment.
Yeah, definitely. The one thing that helps them is the fact that because everything's fortified, technically because the trash takes a longer time to kill off, some of that incidental AoE damage can kind of eventually be mitigated because the health pool is just bigger. Things aren't just going to pop away, but Bloodlust already been popped here by Method NA. This is what we saw actually from one of our teams in the first series. Then it kind of bit them a little bit in the bud when it came to the boss, obviously, because it takes a little bit longer, but trash on Fortified is much more important.
Right, you are. A good Typhoon there by JB as he punts the mobs out of that Sanguine that drops on the ground. We, of course, are back to that bolstering Sanguine situation. Sanguine dropping the pools that will heal mobs that sit in them and, of course, damage the players. Cheeky little skip here by Method NA as they kind of get through the roots and the rocks there at the top, getting ready to pull the last 4-pack, after which they will skip the 2 bears, as pretty much every team does these days, and start the RP from Dallas. Sunsky not far behind, but a bit lower on trash as they opted to pull a different pack, but they still have their Bloodlust available.
An important thing to note before we actually really get deep here into the thicket is that Method NA's times from their regional for Dark Heart Thicket was much, much better than Sunsky. If you look at the plus 24 from Sunsky, it was like 30 minutes, 8 seconds, which is, again, it's not that far from the realms of possibility here that we see kind of a harder time here for Sunsky, especially since they did have a few wipes during that instance as well, but it was tyrannical compared to Fortified.
We see the Warlock portal go up there for Method NA. Of course, not something Sunsky will be able to take advantage of. Method NA going in and pulling Dallas right away, not with some extra trash that we saw some of the other teams do. Of course, they don't have access to that Rogue, who Rich said earlier is able to kind of equalize things in the single target DPS department. A lot of cleave damage coming out of those 2 Windwalkers plus the Warlock. So they'll just be going one-on-one with this boss. We see the typical JB, or usually the healer, depends who's most survivable, sitting out of the group, eating those cat pounces, going into bear form to make sure he soaks them and heals that debuff back above 90% so that it doesn't take too out of hand.
Sunsky actually sacrificed the tank to actually eventually get past those bears here, so the 1 death on either side. So it's not as pretty so far for Sunsky in comparison. One thing they do have is that the mage, as you just saw there, could actually potentially take the pounces. You can either ice block or, you know, even try and cauterize down the line. It's not the most safe of methods in any stretch of the imagination. That was no pun intended with the method use.
Ah, my aura is spreading. Sunsky did pull some of the trash that we were wondering about if they do earlier with this comp. The Windwalker gets chunked pretty hard there. I think he ate 1 of the flower debuffs from the ground, but they do have the Bloodlust to kind of compensate, but they're going to be really careful with what they're DPSing here. They don't want to bolster Dallas here. Method NA at 13% already on Dallas, getting ready to finish off the phase, of course. The tank facing the boss into the wall so that that bear punt does not get him very far, and also the boss will reform back to his humanoid form upon hitting the wall prior to hitting the tank. They finish the boss off no problem, and now this is, I would say, probably where the most difficult or questionable pulls come in for these teams. Huge pulls coming in this kind of garden house area with the flowers and with all the bolstering and the Sanguine Colors.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why you see a lot of teams actually gathering it all up, taking it around the house on the right-hand side later on down the line. But interesting to note on Sunsky's side, whilst they're killing this boss off, some people may be saying, well, they don't have a rogue, you know, why are they actually killing off some of this trash while actually dealing with the boss? It actually benefits the Demon Hunter quite nicely as well. As long as you're going I-Beam build, you can technically be in your demon form just a little bit longer whilst doing that, so you can get some more DPS out.
Certainly pre-planned. I mean, these teams have been practicing this to death. We've talked to all of them by now, several hours a day. So I would assume they know what they're doing. You know, might have a hiccup here and there, but their strats are certainly ironed out and laid out for this competition. Sunsky downing Dallas here, finishing off the rest of the trash, as Method NA is now kind of rearing up to pull this really dangerous pull that we were talking about earlier. We'll see exactly what they want to do. So they do pull the first Keeper pack, and it looks like it'll be a big one here as they actually stop just shy of the fountain. Not sure if they're going to pull the flowers around the house in just a moment, or maybe safely split it into 2 instead.
Yeah, we'll see. As just trying to get to actually teleport there on towards that position, thanks to the fact that they're right next to the wall here. So going to work on a few of these to begin things off, and it's just an easier way for them at this point to be able to group things up, not having to use Death Grasp, and that's the 1 minute 30 cooldown if it's talented, so should be okay for them here.
Yeah, so they save a lot of time there. The ones in the house are coming around soon as well. They get the leg sweep down now. this is where we're going to have to focus when you saw some issues with some of the other teams in the previous phases. You want to make sure that as soon as these mobs start dying, you get that Typhoon out, what JB does right there. No ticks of Sanguine going down, all those Blossoms as they get finished off. One more AoE grip, which you mentioned earlier, of course, was saved for a reason like this. Don't want to get the extra health percentage on the mobs because they do heal for a percentage with Sanguine. And when they get those bolster stacks, that extra bit of percent could be a huge amount of raw health.
No, absolutely. It can really hurt you down the line. So going to moving back onto this keep now. It was out of range to actually have any extra bolsters going on. So this will be killed off quite nicely and quickly. And JB just in general is a high advocate of being able to pump out as much DPS as a healer as possible. And generally he'll just leave E-Name to be able to kind of eventually kind of whittle himself down, have his own kind of sustainability, and then only once, like for example, when Purg's gone, then he can start worrying about him, or if E-Name is going to be calling out for cooldowns, etc.
Right, sure. So JB does move those two keepers off to the side of the pack that we see teams often skip a lot, but no deaths here or anything associated with that except for JB, who will likely unfortunately die on the side there. They intended, of course. They do pull the two flowers into the patrol of the Dryad plus the extra two Blossoms prior to getting ready to work on the 5 GUIs before Okard. Sunsky not too far behind, but they're only now starting to kind of chew through this puzzle-like zone, deciding what they want to do with the Blossoms and the Keeper pack.
Marvin, being a Warlock, obviously has the opportunity to have Sacrolash just in case they want to kite some of these in this packs, this area. Of course, they could have done that up towards the top, but they were just grouping it up. E-Name was moving away and just kind of reducing as much damage as possible. You're not having to deal with anything crazy like Skittish. This is an Eye of Ashara here for this one, so you can still get away with some of that kiting quite easily if needs be.
Dropping that D&D with a 70% slow as he walks out. JB wants to make sure there is no healing on those Blossoms, getting that Typhoon out in his bear form as he tries to pump out, as you said, as much damage as possible. Now, rearing up to pull these 5 GUIs. These are particularly dangerous mobs. We always mention this just because they have frequent tormenting eye cast. Not only do they do damage while they channel, but if they do go off, they'll fear and nuke the player for 5 seconds. You want to make sure you constantly CC, interrupt them, get those arcane torrents out for now, and get as much interrupt as you can on the mobs.
Yeah, definitely. Warlock's got a little bit of control with that as well, so by the time all of that full control rotation has gone down, they should be okay. And you see already one Death Master Meow. Actually, once again, I think he died off before as well, so it's a Windwalker Monk, so yeah, they are sustainable to some of those deaths, especially if they're not quite timing out things like Touch of Karma. But beyond that, just a few deaths on their side, not great, especially considering they're still behind.
Should be no problem as they move up to the 5 GUIs themselves. But I mean, the trash difference between the two teams is something that we do have to keep an eye on. I mean, 25% is a lot moving into the last phases of the second half of the dungeon, after Okard goes down, which Method NA has now pulled. Nothing too dangerous. This is definitely one of those bosses that you think about, at least in the tyrannical setting. AoE Stomp's very scary. The crushing grip on the tank, not so much for Blood DK, can be very scary, but we're in a 23 fortified setting. So nothing too dangerous here, but we see also they opted not really to pull any extra trash on top of it from either of the bosses. They're playing it quite safe compared to some of the bolstering trash plus boss combos that we've seen in previous series.
Yeah, dealing with this quite nicely, and you see there that E-Name just getting picked up, and he will be able to sustain through that quite nicely. It's not too threatening, especially on this fortified setting. They're not really popping any of the roots, to be honest, either at the moment, just kind of ignoring that for now. There's no real reason for them to, in terms of the double Windwalker with the Warlock as well, aside from just kind of a nuisance here and there, they should be fine.
Band name doing well to sustain that damage. I mean, Blood DKs are so well built for the crushing grip too. They'll have an AMS accessible to them every other crushing grip. And with the amount of haste, depending what gear he's wearing and how well he generates his runic power, he should have Vamp Blood available for every single one too, which is just kind of a joke for the healer to heal through in this fortified setting. There's another one he will get thrown in a moment. And Okard is just starting to get chewed through for Sunsky on the left. Not too far behind, and they did finally catch up on some of that trash percent, but with how close we've seen some of these matches be, 2 deaths can kind of spell doom for them by the end of the map.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Even the one, just our previous series there, it was those deaths that really made a difference in the outcome of that match as early on in this tournament as it was. The one thing for Sunsky is technically, if they do want to have a few little adds with it, again, that Demon Hunter would benefit a little bit to keep himself in that demon form, but it's not a massive impact on a boss like this here for Okard, especially with its just fortified setting. And now you can see here Method NA just going to start working through some of these. And I was seeing a lot of teams actually just kind of reposition this elemental over to the side of this kind of runway, so that when those adds spawn, it's just a little bit easier to eventually move away from them, with Marvin eventually finishing it off.
And not just that, but just in case the absolute worst case scenario happens and they do wipe, they buy themselves space around the side of the elemental to run back without having to aggro the smaller elementals that eventually will metamorphosize into larger ones again. They finish that off well. Everybody does well to run away, pick up the rest of the GUIs, and the Tainted Blood Fury that you see in the distance will usually be skipped. As soon as it's patrolled over to the left side, we'll often see JB or whoever can root it, CC it however they can. JB, you can see, is already pre-positioned there to do so as soon as he can. Very bolstered Slime here. Unfortunately, got a few ticks of that healing from the Sanguine. Dart getting smacked in the face there. Doesn't go down, just barely hangs on at 1%, and they move on and root that Elemental.
Very, very close to death there. And, I mean, again, they are still a little bit ahead, so it wouldn't have been hugely impactful just yet, but you never know coming up to the later stages of this. And I'm interested to see how they're going to handle the trash over towards Xavius. But now going on to Dresseron here, it looks like we're going to see, you know, band name just reposition himself over towards these, getting a few whelps on out and just kind of trying to benefit here. I assume he's got Skullflower's Homeostasis on, so the more that, the Blood Boil is going to be able to proc off, he's going to be able to get more out of his Death Strikes. It'll be nice. And
it's really under these kind of not so strenuous situations in the 23 fortified, it's really just for the extra damage, the 20% damage per stack for his Death Strike. We do see that Caven go down in maybe not the most opportune area. We have discussed that sometimes the Caven comes before this AoE win pushback, and they got kind of in a not so nice situation here where the Caven spawned under the boss and they were kind of rapidly trying to run into the boss's hitbox, but of course they were denied by the Caven area. At least they know their order now, so they'll be able to appropriately bait the Caven away from the boss, as we see there, just off to the side, and get ready as they dragon the boss around.
Yeah, just bait the breaths away as well here as the tank, and then just be able to move out of those, sidestep out of them, and then when the pushback comes along, you should be okay, because it's repositioning here, as you kind of see here, they've got plenty of room to work with. So even if they got pushed back quite far, it would be okay. One thing that impressed me really nicely when Skyline D were playing was Mew's ability to just be so mobile and get out of things like that. You would see him switch into travel form straight away and be able to reposition. JB's not going for that. It's not that big a deal, but it's just like those min-maxing things that could make a difference.
JB getting as much damage in as he can as Dresseron dips sub 20%. They start to slowly move it over to the exit of the room, which of course there is gated behind a bit of RP as that Vine Wall despawns when Dresseron goes down 10% now. Sunsky not too far behind on the boss's percent. Relatively speaking, of course, in the dungeon, I mean, 50% is a lot, but they've caught up quite nicely after some of their hiccups earlier. The big talking point here right now is the 7% trash, because it's going to provide a lot of kind of the variance in what method decides to skip and what they decide to pull, whereas Sunsky is now locked into killing at least one extra pack within that area.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head, because let's be honest, Darkheart Thicket, from what we've seen so far, not only from the globals, but also from the regionals, there are plenty of opportunities to reroute, choose which packs you want to take. For example, in our first series, we saw them stealth pass, go to the Bat and the Status, pull them all together, and then be able to bring them down like that. But Method NA is going to choose to take these out. I wonder if they try and skip anything further on. Maybe the one right next to Xavius, that can be always a bit of a pain.
The most typical percent that we see coming out of Dresseron is the 87 to 88%, something that Method NA had, 87% right there. So Sunsky has 7%, which is usually at least the bad pack that they need to deal with. We see Method now kind of pull the Bats to the side. JB is off healing on the side. They combine it with some of the Satyrs that were patrolling earlier and will likely reach their 100% just from this group alone. And as you said, Claris, they will skip that last kind of 5-6 pack that's particularly dangerous to everybody off to the side and then just work on Xavius.
Important to note, though, we are currently approaching Shell's Angels time with that 13 minutes just passed here by Method NA. Obviously, Shell's Angels was 13 minutes 54, so I'm really excited to just kind of compare these numbers to get a really good gauge of where we're at. We're only at the start of the tournament. Nobody gets eliminated here, but these numbers will matter later on down the line, maybe when they face each other, you know? It's really exciting.
The Bloodseeker is getting a few bolster stacks there right now. Luckily, they are about to fall, but it's going to do a fair bit of damage to the tank. I mean, those hit the tank pretty hard, I know from experience, and the dot is nothing to scoff at too, but it does get dispelled and kited as frequently as possible. They start heading over to this last pack. As you can see on the board, already 100% on trash. Expect to just see the Invis pods come out right away. They don't want to drag it to the side and risk anybody getting clipped or put in combat and have any extra deaths. Nice clean run from them, and they're rearing up to pull Shade, the final boss of the dungeon.
Absolutely, and considering that they've got 2 reses available as well, if this was tyrannical setting, we'd be like, phew, well, at least they've got 2 reses left, but because it's fortified, it's not too much of an issue. Sometimes you can have a Nightmare Bolt go off and really hurt someone, say, for example, if the Windwalker monks aren't really timing out their cooldowns as they should be, but beyond that, the explosion at that intermission phase is nowhere near as scary as we had in some of the regionals.
No, you're absolutely right. Some of the danger really will come with some of the RNG of the spawns of the Swirlies in the last phase, depending on how many connect with Shade of Xavius, giving him that 5% 50% damage buff stacking up to 10 times, but usually it's not too much of concern, which is why you see most teams pull Shade, or actually really tank Shade where he starts against the wall there, just to limit the amount of area that can possibly hit his hitbox. They're approaching rapidly for the 50% now. Sunsky still struggling in the hall, quite low health on the Windwalker as we speak, and we see some of the Dread Inferno casts go off as they run them off to the side and struggle to kind of get everything together and start working on this trash.
And at the same time here, with them almost killing this off, we'll go into that intermission phase, and technically we should see Method NA be okay. One thing that I've really taken away from this is that Sunsky's mage has not been able to really make up it. Ooh, Dark goes down.
Looks like you spoke too soon, Kalaris, as we do have a death over. Fortunately, they easily have the battle res. Marv took a pretty big hit there too, as far as Warlock damage and take it goes, but they managed to survive. Marv, of course, moving over to help JB with the pacification aura from the Nightmare Bolt. Anybody who's not supporting their buddies in that will cause them to not be able to cast or really do anything for 20 seconds. Moving well out of the swirlies. Shade now does drop sub 30%, and everything seems to be stabilized after that scary period with the explosion. So as long as they stay on top of the pre-defensive use before the Nightmare Bolts hit and heal through any dot damage, including the dispels, they should be okay.
I can only imagine he had to use his cooldowns on something like a Nightmare Bolt before, and that's why he didn't have the ability to keep himself alive just there, but it doesn't really matter, because as I was mentioning before, I feel like Sunsky's mage choice for this instance has hurt them a little bit, but maybe they can make that up in a counter pick later on, with Method NA looking very good with a good time to get things rolling here in Darkheart Thicket.
Shade of Xavier is now 7%. A couple of those swirlies will hit him for damage, but it's too little too late for Shade, and without a shade of a doubt, they will be destroying the rest of this dungeon as they take the first game. So it looks like Twitch chat predicted this one correctly, and we do have Method NA taking the first series here.
Will the mage be enough to allow them to bring it to a game 3, or will we see Method NA grab the hot 2-0?
Let's get into it then. Game at number 2 at the moment, with Method NA leading that 1-0. What's important to note, though, is that Sunsky, with the Warrior instead of the Windwalker Monk in the previous... Whoa, okay. They're doing that unintentionally, never mind.
Scared me, Kalaris. Drinking water.
There you go. It was 22 minutes, 10 seconds for them on a plus 23 BRH with the mage, but again, with the Warrior instead of the Windwalker Monk. I think they'll be able to make up a little bit of time as long as Master has mastered his class.
Right, you are, and I do want to point out, of course, that we are in a grievous bursting situation with Tyrannical. Those will be updated momentarily. Meaning, they have to be careful with how much of the trash they kill as they reach especially some of the post-second boss trash, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. Don't want too many bursting stacks. Moving up to the Amalgam of Soul, very typical for teams to just skip all the trash. We see the Bloodlust come out on both sides. This boss, nothing really to be too worried about. We see those scythes come out, punt players around. Of course, the fear circles, you want to make sure you kite move out of them. The big deal, Kalaris, of course, we know, is at 50%. Once the boss enters that transition phase and spawns those 8 spooky ghosts around the edge of the arena.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes it causes me a little bit of heart palpitations, because as much as they kill off like maybe 1 or 2 on the other side, sometimes you can control another one to then eventually elongate out that phase. Generally, what you will see is the Death Knight will allow so many of them to get quite close to the boss, Death Grasp them all in, and then just be able to AoE them down whilst they're locked down in that position. But it always does cause me scary times, because they always get so close.
And we see the mage over on Sunsky has already gotten a Frost Nova down on that top left. Spirit wanting to make sure to delay the phase as long as possible, because as long as the spirits aren't absorbed, the boss will kind of stay in this useless transitionary phase in terms of damage to the players until 15%. But should all of the spirits be killed, absorbed, or the boss reach 15%, the boss will do a massive AoE cast buffed by 100% per spirit absorbed. So certainly something that the teams, especially with these poor little Windwalkers, is going to have to keep in mind, and they need to use some defensive to stay alive for that.
Definitely on the Tyrannical, it can get scary. I do enjoy it though when my boss AFKs for a little while on Tyrannical. I'm always happy for extra damage, not too bothered by that. As you see in the continued control here from Sunsky on the... I can't English. What is English?
You've won too many coffees this morning, I'm afraid. But, I do agree. I like this kind of AFK phase for the boss. It allows me to go get a drink from the fridge, usually come back, and then, we're about 15%. Big explosion there for Sunsky. No deaths on the board. We see the ice block come up from the mage. Everybody uses their defensive, survives no problem. Method NA falling a bit behind damage this time, so they're just hitting that 22% mark right now. Plus, they have the 2 deaths on the board. Did not use that in this part of the beginning. So, but they'll have the extra 10 seconds to make up, plus only now reaching Amalgam at 15% for their explosion. So Sunsky looking pretty well rehearsed in this map so far.
Yeah, not too bad at all. And they're going to head off towards the tower in a moment. Just go up where the spiders are going. Grievous Bursting can definitely be a nuisance here when it comes to the spiders to try and deal with it. Oh, but deaths on the side of Method NA.
The Warlock going down in this case. Not the person you'd really expect to go down, but unfortunately Marv does eat that to the face, get one shot. They opt not to use the Battle Res, which I think is a smart call here by them. The boss is already so low. They want to save that for later. So they just opt to eat that extra few seconds, having to four-man the rest of the boss, and now move over and wait for the RP and the door to open as they work their way up the Black Rook hold. Of course, Sunsky moving up the stairs here for the spiders. Now, there's a lot of dangerous trash in here, not only because of, well, what the trash does, but because we are in this bursting scenario. Bursting, of course, being every time a mob dies, it will apply a dot to the entire team that stacks and refreshes every time another mob dies. So you have to be careful with what you're pulling and how much you're pulling. And as I say that, Sunsky does a massive pull upstairs with all the spiders. You can pre-immune those bursting stacks, but this is going to be a lot of damage on the group as everybody starts chunking down.
Yeah, definitely is. One already falls. Jinfan has already gone down there. Needs to get him up for it. Fasty is going to respawn downstairs. Have to run all the way back up here. But big damage going down on the return of the group. It should be fine now. They've cleared the majority of those bursting stacks. Now they can just kind of say, okay, wait, stop, and time this out once again. But with him falling, it does slow down this a little bit, even though they are still ahead.
They have to make sure, of course, not to kill the Arcanist on the side, which is why you see that Control Undead has been put out by that Blood DK, making sure that no damage goes into it. That is the key mob to their strategy, with the Mage stealing those stacks up to 350% damage. So we're going to see the Mage fly, as soon as they find their way back upstairs, of course, fly in damage and start stealing some of those stacks. Method and A finally having access to the stairwell as well as they move upstairs into the same room.
Definitely, and this is one of the areas where Sunsky can start really ramping up the pressure on Method NA. This room in particular, especially when you group everything together, having the Mage get that and now extra 300% damage off very quickly in that 10 seconds burst means that you alleviate so much of the risk here, where there's so much AoE going down. You have to dodge out of the way of the archers, you have to dodge out of the way. Well, the cat's annoying, but normally people deal with the cat in the other way. So yeah, it can be deadly.
And not a cat person, are we, Claris?
No, always dogs.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind, and I will forego your birthday present this year. The Arcanists now having their stacks stolen as they prepare for this hallway. And just like you said, part of the danger with this trash is not so much just the damage on the tank, but you have archers shooting randomly. Just huge amounts of damage at players. You have to babysit all of these mobs in terms of frontal cleaves, the knife dance as well, and you can only do that with hard interrupts or displacements. You cannot just kick interrupt those. So the faster this dies, the better for everybody in the group, of course. Method and A dealing with their own huge pull as they pull the entire hallway here. Of course, you're going to see them accelerate a bit faster on the trash. They don't have to wait for the kind of mage buff going on, but here goes Sunsky as well. Big AoE grip in the middle of the room for both of them. We see the bop go up right away on the mage, making sure he survives this onslaught of damage and absolutely just annihilating all of the trash in the room by the time Method and A even get to finish their pull, which they started first. A lot of damage going out on the Windwalker, though, and Method and A on their side having a death as well that they needed to use on Dark.
Yeah, retreats on back there, Jinfan, to try and get more spell steals, trying to work well on this next trash as well. With, what would you call it? Shamalama Ding Dong? That's, I think, what you called it.
That's what it says on the screen.
That's, yeah, it's nothing else. So eventually they will bring this down, but again, you know, that power as he blinks forward, spell steals, comes back in to try and get out more damage. Jinfan playing well.
I mean, both teams are playing excellent here, but both teams don't have a battle res available, something that's going to be absolutely crucial, especially for Sunsky moving up to these tyrannical bosses. If that mage flops over early in any of those encounters, it's going to spell big trouble for that team, considering how reliant they are on the mage spell stealing on this map. Method and A now cleaning up the Shamalama Ding Dong trash. Indeed, another death going over for Mitt on the side, one of the two Windwalkers. These guys just have a rough time in this hall, unfortunately, Windwalkers. No battle res available, and certainly the pack is about to die, so not worth releasing all the way down in Amalgam's room. And Sunsky just moving on to the last trash pack before Ilisana.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, Windwalker Monks, yes, they have a few cooldowns, but not that many. And when it comes to that AoE cleaves in front of things, everything, the Windwalker Monks have to be super keen about exactly where every little step is that they take. Now, what's important to note is that obviously the mage, the Arcane Mage, has some setup time, but each and every time I saw it, I timed it out against everybody, and it would at least be saving like 30 seconds to 1 minute 30 on some of these bosses with setup time and kill time. So
we have a death go over for Sunsky and the Holy Paladin. No battle res available, and the Grievous stacks are just accruing for the two remaining members, stacking up to 5 until they're healed above 90%. We're going to see a death coming out for the Windwalker as well. Just can't do anything about that. they too as well opt not to release and just wait to hopefully finish the rest of this. But I mean, they have to release at some point. They don't have a battle res available, and none of the 3 remaining members in the group, unless I'm blind, which I'm not for once, can res. The 2 people that can res were dead. So they have to release and start running back. Perhaps it took them a bit long to realize that, because it took them a while to release. But Method NA, I mean, they're already ahead. They've already pulled the boss. So any advantage that Sunsky is getting from this mage, they're slowly losing right now.
Yeah, definitely. And this is kind of, you know, our critique at the very beginning of it, because mages do not mean an insta-win here on Blackrock Hold, so it's getting a little bit dicey for them at the moment. They're going to try and go for that setup, wait for the other members to actually return here as well. But Ilyasana, obviously, you've got the Brutal Glaive, which can be very irritating to deal with. It hits really, really hard, especially on this tyrannical setting.
And I mean, it just, I thought you were going to say it's brutal to deal with, but, and it does apply that dot. The most dangerous, I would say, though, is definitely that Fell Rush. And it does target 3 members that often kind of stack in a triangle around the boss to minimize the amount of area that is restricted. Now, during this transition phase, Ilyasana at 0 energy will run off, or fly off, I suppose, on cast I-Beam on one of the ranged targets, whilst 2 mobs come around the outside. One Arcanist spawns right in front of her, and one of the champions, the Vanguard in this case, spawns and jumps over the wall. You stack them up near the boss so that the melee can have their effective cleave as well. You gotta make sure to interrupt those Arcane Blasts, because those are the very same spell that stack increasing damage and can one-shot one of your teammates.
Xinfan starts popping off here with 40% damage on the boss already completed. So big damage in that 10 seconds, billions basically, when it comes to the numbers that are actually flying out. So catching up quite nicely when it comes to the race as a whole. But what's important to note as well, it's such a min-maxing thing. You see on the side of Method NA, even just the Death Grip to bring one ad over in that transition phase to get as much cleave on them as possible, but they're still focusing on the boss. It's very important. Unfortunately, the mage gets targeted there by the I-Beam, so going to have to blink away, losing a small amount of DPS, but not too impactful.
You know, I will critique for a moment. I mean, certainly I'm not a professional mage by any means or anything, but I have seen a much higher top-end damage for some of the mages doing this kind of Ilyasana damage, planting at the start, making sure they don't get targeted by that Fell Rush. So although it was, of course, an impressive and needed crucial amount of damage, we've certainly seen bigger, and we've certainly seen teams, by the time the mage has kind of done their wonder trick, the boss is already at, you know, that 25% range. So a bit of damage lacking there, but certainly the damage they needed to catch up and make up for the folly that they had with that trash pack before this boss. Method NA now working on the second phase 1 for Ilyasana, and then we'll start to continue towards the 3rd boss.
That feeling when you're the mage and you really wish your Disc Priest was playing Disc Priest so that they could potentially get focused by the I-Beam, but no, not to be. Our Paladin is in melee range and doing Paladin things. 3% almost dead here for Ilyasana, and then on the other side, Method NA just trying to catch up, but they understand that the mage is on the other side, and they're just gonna probably have to play and catch up at each of these bosses, especially Smash Spike, which does melt once again to the mage.
And so crucial, this hallway coming up is absolutely crucial. We do see the Rock here as they dodge it. Of course, I'm talking about that boulder, not Dwayne the Rock Johnson. They are running up the stairs right now. Now, this hallway is going to be crucial because of the bursting stacks, and there is a lot of, as we refer to them, smallies in this hallway. Not a lot of health on these, and it's just so easy to get carried away with the amount of bursting stacks that you put up. And typically, we see teams pull this entire hallway, as we're seeing right now. Huge pull coming up here. They're really going to have to work to kill whatever they can first, take that 4-second breather, and then kill the rest of it before the bursting stacks wipe them out.
Is that because they become biggies later on? Is that the reason?
A biggie smalls, we're going to say, right?
Grouping them all up, getting that stun down as well. Really need to power this out. This is a very dangerous room, especially for this kind of mage composition in general. Like you could see actually the health spiking there from some of these.
That refresh was not the best there. Tons of damage coming in on the DH. The mage had to ice block that early. Now, these Blade Lords are very dangerous as well. The bursting stabs have cleaned up, but for the tank particularly, when they cast that assault, you want to make sure that you stun and interrupt them after the cast is done while the channel begins, else they will recast it immediately. So well done by the team there. Excellent pull by them. They get the feast down, no deaths in the end. They had to spend that only the block, and now we're moving up the stairs.
Both as well, really. I mean, Method NA on the other side not doing too badly. As long as nobody gets hit by the boulders, should be okay. And we'll eventually be moving on to that gauntlet with the bats. And then, for the most part, the bat gauntlet isn't really too terrifying, unless, for example, you know, some of the dudes up at the very top get really big, and then that can always be a bit of a cause for concern. But usually, you see your tank kiting away. It should be fine.
Those dudes indeed. Now, the
those
biggest
guys.
danger really comes here, not for the tank, actually, at least not unless they get to, get too many casts off and those Dominators get too many buffs, but rather for any other member in the team, because these Dominators do cast sick bats on one of the members. And as we can see there, the bop was already used on somebody else. They cast sick bats on the healer, immediately turn and smack him. That's why we got to stay close to the tank when you're running up. Paladin releases, so the rest of them are off by themselves. We do know Blood DKs can, of course, handle themselves very well, but if the other members of the team start to dip below 90% here, they're going to start getting those Grievous stacks, and we can see it right now on the screen.
Yeah, without actually being there, you could see sick bats was on Jim Fan, and
those are actually bursting. Sorry, go on though.
There's a bursting on the other side.
Ow,
Yeah,
it's
but
Grievous.
and you see Maomaster actually go down as well, probably and very likely to be for the same reason that we saw the previous death as this continues on. And now they're just going to move up to the boss, try and get that setup going. But with their current pace, with the mage who's died again. Then
it just cast off. That's fine.
They should be able to have a good setup and a really fast catch up here against Method NA.
This is pretty neck and neck. Method NA keeps starting these bosses just a bit ahead of time of Sunsky, who then catches up with the amount of mage damage going on. Both teams at 7 deaths apiece. Method NA using their Bloodlust on Smash Spite. Typically, we do see teams using this as there's no transition phase where you waste some of it, like in the last boss that we'll see later. Now, Smash Smite hits the tank pretty hard. We do have those kind of guano bat lines that go down. You want to make sure you get to the side of the room. But Klar's, the problem with this boss that we see a lot, as we can see the arrow on Method NA, and we've seen some of the mages suffer to this and die, is that charge. If nobody intercepts that charge, and then combined with the AoE stomp after, it could spell disaster for someone.
Yeah, and we saw, especially during the regionals, a lot of control from teams on this boss when that stomp goes down to actually just not heal up too quickly. They understand the kind of the limitations of all of these teams' health pools and classes' health pools, but for this, it is Grievous as well, so you kind of have to pay a bit more attention to that stomp when it is active.
Once again, Grievous, though, having an AoE mid getting quite low there, doesn't dip too badly, though. We'd have a Grievous support a bit, at least, from that Blood DK consumption, ending that leech for 15 seconds. Of course, not always available, but you can have a max uptime of it of 33% of the time, 15-second cooldown, 45-second cooldown, 50-second duration. Sunsky now working to chew through the boss, expectedly, as we knew before. They get the Bloodlust off. The mage doesn't die, no problem. Smash Spite already below Method NA's score at the moment, who did pull the boss earlier. But again, not very far off, and there's still a bit of trash left before that last boss.
Yeah, very, very close right now. So, and for Sunsky, they will eventually kill this boss off with just a little bit of extra damage going down. Because if they didn't, that would be a bit terrifying. But you can see already there's not that much room left over for Method NA. Their killer takes a little bit longer, so there they don't have that much room to work with. But you can see the positioning of how they've placed down that back groups. So they've given themselves a good space to be able to eventually position against charges, etc. So they're not that limited.
Method NA just finishing off Smash Spite as well as Sunsky prepares to pull what is usually the entire haul of these Lancer and Swordsmen. Now, the problem with these mobs is, well, there's not too many problems with these mobs, but you can get caught in a kind of chain of stunning.
Never
if you
ends.
fall into the Lancer's Raven's dive, you will get stunned for 5 seconds, no diminishing return on it. And with how many there are, they pull a lot of them. Now, I want to see if they actually end up pulling this with the boss. We've seen some teams do this in kind of a Hail Mary to try and win the dungeon. Swordsman, not too dangerous. Bit of damage on the tag, so they do pull everything together. We're going to see a big AoE grip here coming in just a moment, and they're going to work to AoE everything down as quickly as possible.
Yeah, important to know that if one stun does go down in this chain that you've mentioned before, then that would be lights out here for Sunsky. So they are playing with fire, to say the least. Right now, controlling it not too badly, just moving from side to side, making sure they're not going to be in the beam that comes down here, making sure they're avoiding that little glaive from Kurtalos as well, while killing off all of those Lancers. And Method NA for now is going to be moving up into the boss as well, and is at 99%, so once they've been able to take one Lancer themselves, that will eventually round out the trash for them.
I mean, Sunsky just did so much damage there and crashed one of our observers' computers, doing an excellent pull there, getting everything together, finishing off the last percent, but the mage does go down, crucial to the strategy. Fortunately, they do have that last battle rest to get him up. Method NA at 99%. We do know, of course, that last percentage will be that Lancer that they currently have control undead cast on. Kurtalos needs to get to 20% before we transition into the final phase, which is Dentalia and Axe, the big Dreadlord.
That's right, and it's a little bit scary for Xinfan now, especially. Admittedly, you know, here on Tyrannical, again, this is a boss that's well versed for a lot of these teams, so they shouldn't be really losing too many people. You can get very unlucky with how the clouds spawn on Dantalianax and create almost like this small wall effect where it's like, oh, I'm going to try and squeeze through that, but it can be a bit difficult. But they should be okay. Still needing those buffs here for Xinfan to really pop off.
Yeah, so the trick here is going to be that they have to release the Arcanist during a transition phase here on Dantalianax. Important first that we survive this big Shadow Bolt AoE volley, which is hit before the players receive their 300% damage, healing, and health buff. Does a ton of damage. No problem for the team to survive that. Everybody gets their buffs. As you can see, they kind of grow in size just a bit. And as soon as Dantalianax disappears and casts Dreadlord's Guile, I would expect to see the Arcanist, which they actually already did, start free casting on the tank so that the mage can start stealing stacks and do as much damage as possible on top of this 300% buff once they get out of that transition phase. Method and A right on their tail. Not even right on their tail. They're actually slightly ahead.
Yeah, it's a little bit scary, especially since Sunsky has 8 deaths against the 7. This could come down to mere seconds unless the mage is able to, as we say, pop off. Darkness was a good use used to won that transition phase to make sure that the Shadow Bolt volley wasn't going to be killing too much, and they were able to deal with the small adds effectively, grouping up as a whole just so they can try and cleave it down. For the double Windwalkers as well, that's super easy to do. For a mage, not quite as easy unless you're in the right position.
And here we go, all aboard the mage train in just a moment. We should see some huge chunking damage as he did spend a significant amount of time stealing the spell. And we just get so much damage on Dantalianax right now. They saw that 5-second timer for deaths to overcome in a moment, but with the amount of damage that mage just pumped out, Method NA is going to have, soon enough, only 5 seconds to kill the rest of this boss. And with their damage output right now, they have to enter another Dreadlord's Guile phase, and I think that's just going to end up being a tie on the series in just a moment here.
Seems that way. Good stuff by Sunsky. I'm not sure you're going to get 42% in 5 seconds on the side of Method NA, but again, they cut it close. It was very close. 1907 coming out from Sunsky, and that's about to see from some of the teams here on the global.
Those numbers is scary. We're going to have to see, can Method NA close it out here, or will Sunsky be able to create one of the biggest upsets of the tournament?
Those numbers aren't as scary as your English, Rich, but as we move on to so typically, Claris, as you were saying, you know, we do see that kind of the healer starts to stealth run upstairs. We have this first pull together, brought together, DPS down by only the tank and the 3 DPS. They then kind of get killed, again, get rezzed upstairs. Something we didn't see Skyline D do, and it actually ended up costing them quite a lot, especially missing that kick on the AoE fear.
Oh, definitely. That's why I'm concerned, man, coming into this one. So let's see if Sunsky can alleviate some of those concerns. And we all know, for the most part, why North America, EU wants to skip this area. There's a lot of scary things that go on down in this tunnel. Not only kind of, I mean, it's not necessarily the bubble that's the scary bit, but there are some AoE abilities that are quite annoying. Also, even the shield that is put up that you have to move things out of, or just kind of interrupt it itself. But everyone dies off. They're going to be rezzed upstairs. Nice and easy.
Yeah, so JB is already running upstairs. We see Espal running over for Sunsky as well. Drops that failure detection pylon, will res on the stairs, and then eventually get the rest of the team up as he safely goes up the stairs. Can indeed skip the remainder of the trash up here to get in that rezzing position as it just patrols back and forth. Just got to wait for the right moment. Bit of an easier time for JB as he can stealth as that druid gets upstairs right away and starts casting that res, getting the team up. And now we just have this last trash before Aggronox.
But already, I'm very happy to see how Sunsky is approaching this compared to what we saw from Skyline D. So it's very clear that as much as, yes, this is a counter pick against them, they've prepared a little bit for this just to be able to eventually kind of round out the best of 3. So it's still up in the air, but I still expect Method NA to be looking strong as they gather up the rest of this trash and are able to bring it down.
Yeah, bear in mind for those at home, of course, we are back to the bolstering affix along with Quaking this time, meaning that every trash swamp that dies will buff everything around it by 20% of current health and damage as well, including bosses, so which is why you see, of course, some of this not so dangerous trash right before Aggronox not being pulled on top of the boss, opting to clean it up first and then getting ready to pull the boss over to the middle fountain.
All right, so not too bad at all, especially on Sunsky's side as well, as they're trying to catch up and continue things on. Just a little bit of trash percent behind here. But again, we're expecting those double Windwalker monks to really start pumping out the damage while dealing with this. And even just kind of having to kite a little bit here is Sunsky's Death Knight. And yes,
these are some large casters going on right here. A lot of bolster stacks on that mob. Of course, the mobs physically grow in size per stack, so a fair bit of mismanagement there on the side of Sunsky, but nothing too lethal for them. They do manage to get it down, move on to the penultimate pack before the boss, as Method NA has already started on Agronox, getting their first Lasher wave out, which does focus one member individually, opting to kind of slow it and CC it under the boss so that can effectively cleave all of them.
Yeah, and a lot of the focus here in this fortified setting for this dungeon means that these bosses are going to melt relatively quickly, so it's going to become a small stump of a tree in a very small space of time, as Sunsky on the other side still just cleaning up some of the rest of the trash that they did do. But as you mentioned, you know, those bolsters on those big mobs really did cost them some time, and all of those little effects are going to add up.
I mean, it's a bit deceiving. You see just a sliver of health on such a bolstered mob, but really that sliver of health represents a massive amount of raw HP. Method NA now dealing with their second Lasher wave moving in. Of course, that succulent Lasher as well has spawned under the boss, a separate flower from the other ones approaching from the outside. Does a devastating amount of damage to the tank compared to the boss, so you're seeing it frequently stunned and punted away from the tank as well before it casts its succulent secretion.
Yeah, so they'll get it off very soon. Sunsky, though, is going to have to catch well up if they're actually wanting to get any kind of semblance of a game going on here right now. Falling this far behind Agronox shows why Method NA has already gone to this instance. Very, very well versed in it. So Agronox is going to fall. And sometimes we do see from this point some people head over to the left-hand side when going down towards the next path, just to get a little bit of extra trash percentage, because you skip that first that walkway, which obviously you need more percent, but it looks like they may not do that.
It just depends how much of that impact later that runs into the portal they're able to capture. The difficulty here really is the bolstering, and we saw earlier with Team Omega sniped as they killed most of it. Really well done by them, but inevitably because of the bolstering, still a few of the imps ended up leaking through the portal, so you'll have to make that percentage up elsewhere. Method NA finally rounding up the steps into Thrash Bites room this time, not Smash Spite, the brother, and getting ready to pull some of the trash here.
Is that the only reason we've come here? They killed one of the brothers, they want to kill the other one just in case it comes back for revenge. But actually, you know what you were mentioning about the imps, I think that overall, as much as they did let some of them get away, it was still very well ironed out in terms of the percentage that they were getting from it, so they weren't too concerned about them actually getting away in the end. Bad Name here taking quite a bit of damage. He's going to just kind of move back there, get a bit of kiting going, and they did actually banish the Scavenger because it can be annoying with those extra casts that actually do come down, so going to group those up now and deal with them.
I get a Cephas proc off fit too, but rounding up the rest of them too, wanting to make sure not to get any of this trash involved with Gazerak, who is very slowly patrolling around the outside of the room. The real danger here will be all of these books that go down, especially the Arcane Tomes, not the Eternal Winter, but the ones that spawn the sentries. You want to make sure that you either kill those, the Book of Arcane Monstrosities, there it is, or that you stun them, and they do get bolsters, so you want to make sure you get that stun or fear out on them so that it stops casting, otherwise it will spawn that sentry, which just has a ton of health. It takes so long to have to deal with that thing.
I must admit though, I was very impressed in our first Cathedral of Eternal Night when people were actually attacking Gazerax and killing him with some trash packs, you know, just to get a little bit of extra damage from those rogues, etc., pumped into Gazerax, because he does have quite a bit of health here on this fortified setting, because again, these mobs are dangerous, so doing that whilst making sure you're not bolstering Gazerax is very impressive. Obviously, they alleviate that from there. They don't want to take that risk because it is a big risk.
It is indeed. Gazerak's being pulled now here. Method NA dealing with it one-on-one, as we said earlier, so they don't really see eye-to-eye with some of the other strategies from the previous teams. But they will be dealing with it solo. No need to pull it out away to the side. Of course, no Sanguine being dropped. But you do want to make sure you turned around before this Focus Destruction cast goes off, else you will take more damage and be disoriented for a while. And certainly don't want to be disoriented as the healer going into this. You want to make sure everyone's nice and healthy. Sunsky's just starting to catch up now, moving their way up to the impact, and are also in Thrash Bite's room, but have not yet killed any of the trash.
Yeah, this is one of the mobs that actually has quite a small hitbox, so actually in Quaking, you do have to eventually spread out later when the cast comes down, as opposed to have a pre-spread, so that's something that they had to be mindful of. And well, here comes good old Smash Bite.
Yeah, and he's not too happy that somebody is intruding into his library, even though he says books are for losers. It's just one of his lines, oddly enough. You want to make sure you stay out of that swirly in the middle there. It does a tremendous amount of damage and punts any surviving members quite far away from the boss. So you just move out and does some residual damage. The main mechanic, of course, on this fight, the focus being that he will fixate a member similar to his brother. In this case, you want to make sure you intercept that charge with either a bookcase or an immunity. It's something that we don't really have available, unfortunately, in this group. So they will have to run and nestle themselves in a bookcase, which is commonly what players do, or even around the outside. We do see the tank go down, though, on Sunsky on the side there. That is getting really messy. That is a huge amount of bolster stacks on those Wyrmtongue scavengers, and we're going to have a full wipe coming out of them. A lot of failure detection pylons go down. They're going to come back up, but they're just increasing this gap of falling behind here.
A little bit kind of an overestimation from Sunsky's side of things, because again, not only are the scavengers scary in their base form, but once they have that bolstering, absolutely terrifying. Threshbite's going to be going down quite quickly here on the side of Method NA, and as you mentioned, you can stand in front of the bookcase, which just even small time saves, you can still be able to DPS whilst you're there, especially if you're the Warlock, so that really helps. And now we're moving on to that impact, which has been so impactful when it comes to actually gaining some of that percent compared to the previous path.
Impactful indeed. Now, it's absolutely imperative here that they round up all the mobs together. Right away, we see that AoE grip come up, immediately into the leg sweep, probably followed up by another one. We have the Typhoon go down, the Ursul's Vortex go down, followed by a Typhoon from JB, and they're just doing a phenomenal job with this trash. Now, here's where we see the bolster start to kick in, right?
Yep.
These mobs have a sliver of health left with it. It's actually so much raw HP, but they do opt to just finish all of them off before heading upstairs to the spider area.
And as you mentioned, as we were at Agronox, because they didn't take that path left to get some trash before they were going up, it's really important that they get the majority of these, come back down, get that scavenger as well, compared to, say, the other teams that were able to allow just a few to leave while that was going on. So good control by them, really good control. You could see that the crowd control overall was very well timed out to be able to get as many kills as possible.
I mean, just excellent by them. They're finishing off these last two scavengers. They'll head up to the spider area. I mean, Sunsky's still working on the trash to even get access to Thrashbite right now, so falling further and further behind. And with the way Method is kind of running up these stairs and just chiseling through this dungeon, it looks like they should be primed to take this series, but of course we do know anything can happen later in some of these dungeons. Grabbing some of the spiders on the side. Now, we've mentioned it time and time again. These spiders are very dangerous for the tank. They don't melee too hard, but it's really those poison stacks. Once they hit that 5-stack mark, it just gets pretty nasty for the tank.
Yeah, any slows you've got, and that's why this composition can excel in this position, especially if you eventually need to kite them. Always an option there if you need it, but with the only like the 5 or 6 that they have here alone, it's not too big a deal, so they can move on up here. Sometimes we see the skip at the front, and they are also going to do that here with those invis pots and just get a nice position. You always kind of want to be stacked up as well on this mini boss though, because there is of course that big AoE in cone AoE in front that after the teleport comes down, then you need to dodge out of it. So if you're all in the same position, you can dodge it pretty effectively.
Right, you are. The Enforcers, if I'm not mistaken, don't give any percent, which is why most teams opt to skip them. They're quite a pain in the butt. And the Orb Caster, which they root on the far side of the patrol to make sure that it doesn't come back into the team as they're dealing with Nalasha, the Spider Queen here, doing well as stack, just as you mentioned, Kalaris. And the spiders here, not only are they not as dangerous to this group because of the kind of peeling they can do in the CC they have, but they just have so many dispels on the team right now that they can use to their advantage. We can see Band Name barely accruing any stacks for any significant amount of time.
And now it's time to kite here just a little bit with that Warlock Portal as well, means it can really position himself a little bit better, and also the Vortex on that left-hand side to pull them back by a bit more time before Band Name here is going to have to reposition himself and move on away. And you can see just going to now especially run away, because that's a lot of little spideys.
Yeah, just getting all the slows out, make sure you're getting that D&D as often as you can for that 70% slow, likely spec'd into that, but he does proc Purg, I think on a purpose here, if I'm not mistaken, which is why they kind of stopped here at the end. They're saying, hey, these spiders are going to take way too long to deal with, longer than just, dying, quickly rezzing. We'll take the 25-second hit, and we're going to move up the stairs. So that was a planned death from the group, and likely they're correct. I hope they're correct about that. They've been practicing this day and night, so they're going to head on upstairs to Domitrax now.
I like the idea of that was planned, but at the same time, they should feel comfortable and confident here, not only on their counter pick, but also so far ahead, not only in trash percent, but also boss progress as they move up here onto the final thing. As long as you have 95% going into this room, guys, you are A-okay with those bats that you're going to be able to get in between these bosses.
Essentially, 95% equals 100% in this case. Quick map. Domitrax now at 90% and 50%. We always say this will spawn 2 sets of portals. At 90%, you'll spawn the Imp portals at the front of the room. Imp's very dangerous, actually, despite their small, not threatening size. But they get those cast off for about 4 or 5 mil, so you want to make sure the tank grabs aggro on them, or you banish them in this case for the sake of Marv, perhaps probably that Cephas as well. And you want to make sure you hide in this shield area when Domitrax reaches 100 energy. for this chaotic energy cast.
You don't want any impending doom here, as they're going to be able to take into the shield to just move on out as well. Very rare that any... It's funny fact that when you're watching this, technically the Aegis actually can dissipate and just disappear in terms of how big that shield is, but very rare at this level, or at any level, in fact, that you actually have that really occur. Unless you're stunned it forever, but then you're losing a lot of damage, and then it's like kind of rubbish.
Yeah, you don't really want to stand in it, and it just depends how long the boss takes, too.
Yeah.
Every cast he does in terms of fire damage, and if the tank points it in, it's just a weird situation that's never going to happen. The Mistresses immediately get banished on one side, and the melee help cleave on the other side. Band name quickly running over, just barely making it in there right before the chaotic energy goes out, and does so at the last second as these Mistresses do, in fact, cast that Shadow World that will punt players, as we see Band name get punted there a few yards back. And the last thing you need is one of them going into that shield area and punting out right as chaotic energy hits.
Oh yeah, that's terrifying. I mean, even if Band name was in a position where he was never going to get there, kind of at least he has Purgatory, but he would still like to be able to keep it. I mean, those Mistresses can pack a punch themselves, never mind the knockback. But you can see here that Domitrax is being dealt with quite swiftly. And with all the portal phases kind of gone now, and with the banish on one of the Mistresses at the back, they're controlling this fight well.
I mean, Domitrax down at 13% now. It's no problem for them. They're not in a tyrannical setting, and after this, they have such a small amount of trash to do with those 4 fell bats that come down right as the boss dies. That it should be clean and easy street for them here. Sunsky dealing with what is one of the most difficult pulls of the dungeon now on the left side of the screen. Certainly not forgetting about them, where they round up all of that trash together, make sure they get the CC down on it as well as possible. And they've done a pretty well-off job there. They're a bit behind percentage, though. Method, I believe, finished with about 84, 85 after dealing with that kind of portal spawn, and Sunsky there is at 76. But Method now dealing with these last 4 Dreadwings before Mephistroth spawns.
Yeah, Mephistroth, the crossover of Mephisto and Sephiroth. I always do like fighting this guy. And obviously there's a few things that you have to deal with as well. The big AoE circles that are put on 2 marks, and then once you actually move away, then the circles get placed down. And obviously you don't want to be standing in any circles. Circles are bad sometimes.
I mean, you could. If you wanted to die.
Yeah.
Which you probably shouldn't.
No.
Everybody packing it on in the middle. JB, as you can see intelligently, runs out of the group before the splash hits and the circles spawn, as we can see them spawning on the side. Immediately runs back in, gets a bit of healing off, and will do whatever damage he can to Mephistroth prior to any more Spire spawning. I don't think we have any more spawn in this first phase 1 right now, as the boss will be transitioning 40 seconds after the pull, perfectly timed with the Bloodlust, of course, as they have done, into the second phase, where usually the tank will be the one picking up the Aegis.
Interesting that Sunsky has actually pulled the trash in front of the mini spider boss as well here, so no utilization of a skip for them, and it won't be too impactful on kind of their progress throughout this dungeon, but I mean, they're quite far behind anyway. Maybe they realize that that's the case here, as Illidan now swoops down to help on out the heroes over in Method NA.
So you will have, of course, to protect Illidan here from these big purple balls hitting him in the face. Kind of never understood why he doesn't just take his blindfold off and see where they are himself, but in this case, you will have to protect him. Once enough time has elapsed and Illidan does not get hit, you will get out of this phase. But for every purple ball that does connect with Illidan's face, you will actually add about 4 or 5 seconds onto this increasing AoE damage phase onto the group. Usually not much of a struggle for the teams here as they finish up, and Mephistroth does reveal himself again.
You're going to have to give back Illidan his golden eyes instead of his fell eyes from beforehand if he wants to see
James
things.
Bond, but...
That's and there you go. So the circles go down once again, able to reposition themselves in towards the middle of that and deal with it quite nicely. And JB here just trying to pump out as much damage as he can. As nobody's really taking too much damage at this phase, and especially without Purgatory Pot here. Band name is under no threat whatsoever.
I mean, just a dominant performance here, and as well it should be, especially with this map being a required map. But Method NA is just going to clean the rest of this up for Mephistroth and advance on to the next part of the winner's bracket, which is actually later today, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Rich Campbell.
Yeah, definitely, indeed. I wasn't listening to you, Sloot. I usually don't, but looking at this, what a performance coming out from Method NA. And it is a double whammy as well.
Thank you so much, Rich. And I'm joined here by Method NA's captain, JB. Congratulations again on winning against Sunsky. Was there any kind of uncertainty that you guys had, especially after seeing Skyline D, taking down Omega Snipe? Was there ever an uncertainty as to what China would bring, especially since it's been such a long time since we've really seen them play?
Definitely the China region was kind of a mystery. It's obviously they had the first regional, and so it's been almost 2 months since we've really seen anything out of them. And just the fact that they're on kind of their own servers, I feel like a lot of the Western teams were familiar with each other, kind of kept up with what each other were doing and had an idea of what was happening there. But we didn't know what China was going to run until literally, we actually did not know what China was running until DHT was done. And then we said, oh yeah, by the way, what classes did they bring in here? And that was the first time we learned their comp. So, yeah, it's there's some guesswork involved.
So once, of course, you saw that mage, you just knew it was going right back to Blackrock Hold. And we kind of saw you a little sleepy back there after the game. You know, it was just something that when you saw Blackrock Hold, you're just like, all right, like, let's see what we can do, but we know that they have a mage.
Yeah, you know, in the 23 pool, BRH was definitely our least practice map because at that point you kind of figure if the other team's got a mage and you don't, they have to screw up for you to win. So not a lot of time in there. And we weren't happy with our BRH performance. We made a lot of mistakes in there as well. So, you know, it was just kind of one of those, let's get into Cathedral and redeem ourselves.
In the next series, you're going to be going up against the winner of Free Marcy versus Method PogChamp. Any worries about a Method versus Method?
Yeah, there's quite a few worries about a Method versus Method. Obviously, either team that comes through in that game is going to be a very tough opponent. So, you know, I'd like, obviously, as a Method guy, I'd like to see my boys do well on the other side of the bracket, but certainly either team that's coming through there is one that we are going to be taking very seriously, and it will feel kind of bad to beat the other Method team, so hopefully, I don't know.
But again, thank you so much, and congratulations again on your victory. Back to you, Rich.
Thank you very much.